the previous videos, we mentioned about the methodology. It is typically the chapter 3 of your thesis, which is after the introductions and literature review. This chapter provides detailed description of the research program as well as the methods that you use in order to complete your research study. You need to provide sufficient information, details, and specifications in various aspects of your research, from the research design, experimental design, or some other testing program, to help the readers to comprehend and imagine how your research was carried out, allowing them to replicate your work if necessary. You know that your entire research is actually built on basis of certain problems which you intend to resolve. From those problems, you will need to clearly outline the objective of your research. And when you have identified the objectives, each objective will be followed by the respective research methodology, analysis, and conclusions. We mentioned that when you put something as an objective, it is not just a statement stating what you intend to do. It is supposed to be a big deal, which is going to constitute a large portion of your research work and a complete cycle, having the testing program, analysis, as well as the conclusions. The conclusions should be structured out in order to answer the objectives. You are recommended to use the one-to-one model in order to minimize the overlapping and the redundancy. This is going to be the simplest model, which when you reach to the conclusion stage, you are able to tell whether you have accomplished the respective objective it intended to. And from there, you will know that whether the intended problem has been resolved. You will need a strong correlations between your objective and the problem, so that upon completion of your objective will automatically lead to resolving of the respective problem. Having this entire research plan, which is referring to your research design, then your methodology can discuss further regarding the testing programs and other relevant details and specifications in order to complete your research program. These are several components that you might need to incorporate in your methodology. Let's say now you are doing the experimental study. There should be a description of the experimental setup. You will need to provide an overview of the experimental setup. This includes descriptions of your test specimen, descriptions of your testing conditions, and probably you need to correlate your testing with the actual situations which you intend to simulate. You will need to describe the data collection instruments used in terms of the materials or apparatus used, as well as the validity and reliability of the measures taken. This is important, as your data collection instruments must be reliable before you can use those results to represent a situation. If you are doing the experimental study, you will need to make sure all the apparatus and measuring instruments are in good conditions, well calibrated, and functional. Not only that, you will need to make sure your experimental setup, particularly in terms of the instrumentations, are placed at the right positions, not to avoid any critical areas which can lead to you missing some important and representative data for your study. And then within your testing program, you need to be clear about the dependent, independent, and control variables. You're going to expect your testing program will be carried out in the mode of relative comparison. Under the same setup and conditions, there will be comparison among the performance of different specimens. There will be independent and dependent parameters. Some parameters are manipulated, and there will be responding variables. You control and manipulate certain variables. Carefully change one of the variables for direct comparison with the other one. This is so that there is only running variables between two specimens for you to explicitly identify the influence of those changing variables. By all means, you should try to avoid any factors that can influence the result to prevent you acquiring the misleading results that can lead to totally different findings. You might need to describe the participants of the study or the samples and specimens. These include the locations of the samples, size of the sample, tracks of the samples, context of the samples, and other ethical issues or sampling. Your samples can be people or some prototype of a product which you intend to propose, or certain system that you have developed, or any modeling that you have done for the simulations, which is dependent on the purpose of your research study. The idea here is to provide sufficient information and details for the readers to gain a better imaginations, covering all the critical and necessary procedures so that the readers can replicate your research or modify your research when they intend to adopt your testing program in their own research study. Next, you will need to provide descriptions of the experimental steps. Describe the steps in the data collection process. There should be justifications in terms of the step in the data collection process by stating the purpose of a specific step taken, stating the result of a specific step taken, and probably highlighting the advantage or disadvantages of those steps. You will need to demonstrate your good understanding in terms of the step for the testing program, knowing the strength and the weakness, fully utilize the advantage of the testing program, and make sure that the weakness of those testing programs shall not affect your testing results, or you have to provide mitigations in order to minimize the effects of those weaknesses of your testing program. Let's say now you are doing the experimental study. Normally there are quite a number of standards which are already established, serving as the guide for you to carry out your experimental program. This is especially for those common experiments. Therefore, you will need to refer to the respective standards, reading through the procedures as recommended, and follow the standard procedures rigorously. In the chapters of the methodology, there will be descriptions of the data analysis procedures. You need to state how you intend to process your data, how the analysis is carried out, and you need to justify the data analysis procedures. If necessary, provide the previews of the result, or giving an overview or general idea of your expected result for the readers to gain an initial ideas how the analysis is intended to be carried out before they enter to the next chapter regarding the result and analysis.